Good afternoon. It's still light outside. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Wayland Meet Your Legislator Forum. My name is Edina Priester. I am the moderator for this afternoon. I wanted to very much welcome our legislators and announce that we are having this because we have two new legislators as a result of the redistricting that occurred following the census of 2020. So Senator Jamie Eldridge is replacing Becca Rausch. And State Representative David Linsky is going to be representing precincts 2 and 3. And once again, Carmine Gentili is representing precincts 1 and 4. So the format of this evening, I'm hoping to keep it to an hour. I think that's a reasonable period of time. Appreciate all of your time and actually appreciate your staff and aides to making this happen for us. Each legislator will have 5 to 10 minutes to present your legislative agenda, any initiatives, and after that, after all three have spoken, we will have a question and answer period from the audience, and we also have some league questions. Are there any questions to format or to process before we continue? If not, then Senator Eldridge, if you would kindly introduce yourself and introduce your legislative agenda and initiatives. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and great to be here with Representative Gentile and Representative Linsky. And of course, for myself, new to representing the entire town of Wayland due to redistricting. So really happy to be here. And thanks to the League for inviting us. And as far as looking ahead to the legislative agenda, it's already been a busy 2+ months. And in terms of what I'm hoping to focus on, and a lot of this overlaps with Representative Gentile and Representative Linsky, because we really, I do think have the same commitment to our districts, including to Wayland, and have the same values. But I would say in terms of looking ahead to the session, with the passage of the millionaire's tax, the mass fair share proposal this past November, that will provide at least $1 billion in new revenue year to year. That is specifically designated just for education and transportation. I think that on the education front, I think there's already a lot of momentum towards universal pre-K, universal early education. There are a couple different proposals out there, but I do think we can get there on that front. On the public higher education front, I'm the author of Debt-Free College alongside Representative Gentile and Representative Natalie Higgins, and really hoping that we can see some dramatic increase in investments in public higher education. I would note that to her credit, Governor Healy in her proposed budget, I think proposes about a $300 million increase in public higher ed. So very encouraged by that. And in terms of the K-12 schools, I think the conversation is there are a number of line items, areas that I think would specifically benefit suburban district schools, including Wayland, and those revolve around the special education circuit breaker, transportation funding, providing more support for teachers and other staff healthcare costs. So, we passed the Student Opportunity Act, and that's providing some investments, but often more well-off suburban school districts are not seeing a major increase. So I do think we need to be focused on that as well. On the subject of housing, I'm a major proponent of affordable housing. I really think that every community needs to do their part to build truly affordable housing. And so I would say that's been one of the hottest topics here on Beacon Hill. I think there's a number of different approaches, but I'd really like to see a significant increase in subsidizing public housing, subsidizing affordable housing, to make sure that people that work in each one of our communities or raising their kids has an affordable place to live for themselves and for future generations. So housing is something I'm very passionate about. On the gun safety front, I really want to praise Representative David Linsky, who I think is the leader in the legislature on gun safety and gun control issues. I've learned a lot from him just in the past few months due to a very unique situation in another town I represent in Littleton that some people here may have read about. It's a mill, an old historic mill where there are literally 86 gun dealers, the largest concentration of gun dealers in the country. That's not a mistake. The largest concentration of gun dealers in the United States is in the town of Littleton in this mill building. So I've heard a lot from constituents about that. I think that we need to strengthen our enforcement of gun laws. Representative Linsky has, again, been the leader on this, but I'm proud to partner with them on a couple of bills, as well as a new bill that would bring the Attorney General's office into inspecting gun dealers because of the concern that some police departments, often rural ones, don't have the staff or resources to properly inspect gun dealers, including what was discovered recently with one dealer in Littleton who was doing a straw gun purchase to someone involved in violent crime in Boston. So gun safety is a big priority. On the healthcare front, I'm a big supporter of making healthcare a right. Massachusetts has near universal health insurance access, and that's something that I think we can all be proud of. But that is different from healthcare as a right. If you look at mental health care, if you look at the state of our community hospitals, if you look at the fact that the number one reason for people going medically bankrupt is due to our for-profit healthcare system, I do think we need to move to a single payer Medicare for all system. That's going to take a number of years, but it's a bill that I refiled for this session. And then other priorities of mine for this session is I think we need to continue to be vigilant on climate action. Very proud for three of us to support and vote for two comprehensive climate pieces of legislation just in the past 2 years. The Next Generation 2050 Roadmap Law, and then this past year, enact driving offshore wind and clean energy. Very proud of that. I know in Wayland, work very closely with Ellen Tone from Mass Energize, but there's a lot more to be done around green building code, about providing more support for climate adaptation and resiliency in communities. And I think really just providing more guidance for communities like Wayland that are already showing the lead on climate action. So that's something that I'm very passionate about as well, and have filed a number of bills on that front. And then I'm someone that is very active in supporting immigrants and proud to work very hard to pass the Work and Family Mobility Act. The district I represent includes communities like Marlborough and Hudson, where there's a large percentage of immigrants, including undocumented immigrants. I don't think we can rest in our laurels. I think we need to find out how can we be more welcoming to immigrants. And there's a couple pieces of legislation, including the Safe Communities Act bill that I've filed, and then also the in-state tuition bill to provide tuition equity for undocumented immigrants, usually young kids who have moved to Massachusetts or the US when they're young, graduated from high school, but have to pay out-of-state tuition rates because of their legal status. So that's something that we could change by an act of the legislature. So those are most of my priorities for the session. I'm proud to work on a whole host of bills. I think the last one I maybe glossed over a little bit is talking about the transportation piece in the millionaire's tax is something that I am saying at every sort of Metro West gathering or meeting in the district I represent is, what do people want to see in terms of improved transportation? There's the commuter rail, there's regional transit authorities, there's shuttles within towns, there's roads and bridges, rail trails. We really need to address the traffic crisis, the transportation problems. Another new video on the MBTA where a panel literally fell down on, I think, the red line right in front of a woman just about to enter the red line subway car. That's unacceptable. So we have more revenue now to fix transportation. How are we going to address it? And I certainly hope today from this discussion get suggestions about how we can address transportation investments in Metro West and in each and every community. So thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to the Q&A, and thanks to the League for reaching out for this discussion amongst Wayland's legislators.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we'll have Representative David Linsky. If you could address us and give us your agenda, thoughts.
Thank you very much for having me, for inviting me. I'm the new guy to Wayland, but I'm certainly not the new guy to the legislature. So let me just take a couple of minutes and introduce myself and talk a little bit about how I approach being a state legislator and then some of my legislative priorities. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm David Linsky. I am Wayland's new state representative representing precincts 2 and 3, basically the southern half of Wayland. And I've been a member of the Massachusetts House now for 23 years. I was first elected in 1999 in a special election, and I have been fortunate enough to now been elected 13 times. I'm one of the senior members of the House. I grew up in Natick. I'm a graduate of Natick Public Schools and Natick High School. I've lived in Natick my entire life. And I'm a graduate of Colby College in Waterville, Maine, and a Boston College Law School. I am a member of the Massachusetts Bar and have been since 1982. I served 14 years as an assistant district attorney in Middlesex County, prosecuting some of the most serious crimes in the state. I've tried 25 first-degree murder trials as a prosecutor and thousands of other types of cases. Since I've been elected in 1999, I've also maintained a small private practice of law. I've been with a number of Boston law firms, and I now have my own law office, my own law firm with an office on Route 16 in South Natick. I'm a father of 3 sons who grew up in Natick and are now, thankfully, adults off on their own. I approached the job of being a state representative, looking at it that there are really 3 separate areas of being a state rep. The first part is the part that most people know about, which is the legislative role. That is voting on bills, debating bills, doing public policy, and then obviously the committee work that goes along with it. The second third of that job is being an advocate for the towns in your district. And I've been fortunate enough for the last 12 years to represent Natick, Sherborne, and Millis, with redistricting that's changing, of course, to Natick and Wayland. I've been really proud, quite frankly, of what I've been able to do in terms of helping the 3 towns that I've represented. I've helped build, as you probably know, a new Natick High School, 2 brand new middle schools in the town of Natick, a new elementary school in Millis, the new Dover-Sherburne Regional middle school and renovations to the high school, and then a new community center, 3 new libraries, a senior center, and I'm quite proud, quite frankly, of what I've been able to do in assisting the town in getting state funds to do all those types of projects. In addition to that, I've been able to basically triple education aid to the town of Natick since I've been a member of the Massachusetts House, and I've helped really improve public education in the 3 towns. I very, very much look forward to helping Wayland do the same types of things, quite frankly, now. And then the third part of the job is really the most rewarding part of the job, and that's the constituent service job. In that, when someone contacts me in my office for help on, say, healthcare or elder care, care or assistance for a special needs child, could be getting an unemployment check, dealing with a state agency on something, that's job 1, as far as I'm concerned, to make sure that state government works for everybody who lives in my district. and it's very rewarding. It flies under the radar, quite frankly, but it's really one of the most important parts of what I do. I very much enjoy helping people on a one-to-one basis. I've grown up with the motto of what we call tikkun olam, which means to heal the world, whereby I believe that each one of us has the responsibility to try to make this world a little better place. And I live my life that way. And I very much appreciate the opportunity that the voters for the past 23 years have given me to try to do this on a legislative statewide basis. I truly cherish every moment of it. I've had the good fortune of being in the middle of some very important issues through the years in the legislature. I'm proud to say that back in 2003 and 2004, I was one of the leaders of the equal marriage movement in Massachusetts. I got to vote to protect the first in the nation equal marriage laws. And after that, I got to vote for the first in the nation universal health care laws, something that I'm very, very proud of. As Senator Eldridge mentioned, I've been involved in gun violence prevention my entire adult life. I've written, quite frankly, most of the gun laws in Massachusetts, helping make Massachusetts one of the safest states in the country, and I continue to try to improve them. This grows out of my experience, quite frankly, as a prosecutor. I've seen what gun violence can do directly. I went to many, many murder scenes in my time in the DA's office, and I know the damage that it can do. We have 50,000 gun deaths in the United States every year, and many times more than that, people are injured as a result of gun violence. We're the only country in the world that has the rate of gun violence that we do in Massachusetts, in the United States. It is a uniquely American problem, and I've taken it upon myself to try to reduce gun violence as best as we possibly can. In addition to working on gun violence issues, I've always been a very strong advocate for public education, not just K-12, but also early childhood education and higher education. I made my maiden speech many years ago on the floor of the House in favor of funding for full-day kindergarten, something that I truly believe in. I want to see every child in Massachusetts, if not the country, benefit by that. I also have a dream that one day the University of Massachusetts will be mentioned in the same breath as, say, the University of Virginia, University of Wisconsin, University of North Carolina, UCal Berkeley, as one of the great public institutions of higher learning in the country. There's no reason we can't do that. In addition to that, I've always been a big supporter of human services in Massachusetts. I believe that we have a moral obligation to try to help those who need help the most. I'm very proud of what I've been able to accomplish through the years in the Massachusetts legislature. I very much look forward to representing Wayland over the next 2 years, and I look forward to meeting as many people from Wayland as I possibly can. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Representative Linsky, thank you very much. And I'm one of your constituents in Precinct 3. So very nice to meet you, and I hope to see you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And last, but certainly not least, our old-time friend and Representative Carmine Gentile. Thank you very much. And let's hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you for having us. Yeah, I have represented, my name is Carmine Gentile. I've represented precincts 1, 2, and 3 in Wayland for 8 years. And now in my 9th year in the House, I'll be representing precincts 1 and 4. And I've gotten to know the Wayland community over the years, and my daughter and son-in-law and my grandson live in Wayland now, so it's near and dear to me. You know, the three of us, Representative Linsky and Senator Eldridge and I, we all share very common values. You know, I represent the 13th Middlesex District. 13 is a lucky number for me. I was born on a Friday the 13th, and I've co-sponsored 13 gun bills with gun regulation bills with Representative Linsky this session. So 13. Education. I feel that I've always felt that education is the best investment that we can make in Massachusetts or anywhere. And so right now we have an opportunity and a need to really assist people with early childhood education. I'm vice chair this session, as I was last session, of the Committee on Higher Education, and I feel very strongly that we should have really debt-free higher education, and we'll continue to work on that to see that that any person who's able to have a college or university education is not thwarted by the financial inability to do so. But you know what I've learned in my life is that, you know, children, the younger they are, the greater the need and the greater the potential. Children at the youngest ages need to be cared for the most, so that doors are not closed to them, so that they don't develop disabilities that will follow them throughout life. Many years ago, like David, like Representative Linsky, I also became an attorney in Massachusetts back in 1982. And I remember some years after that, representing a brother and sister who were ages 2 and 3. I represented them through their 18th birthdays. And they were very bright, very talented people, extremely talented, in fact. But the neglect that they experienced before age 2, before age 3, was such that they had difficulties for many years. Probably by the time they were 18, they'd overcome most of those difficulties. I have priorities this session. Debt-free public education is one of my priorities, as it is Senator Eldridge. And in the area of healthcare, I also strongly support having healthcare for all. Having really, I look at healthcare as being a right. Recently, my wife and I took a vacation, our first vacation of more than a week in 3 years. We went to Costa Rica, and beautiful little country with public education, free education from kindergarten through university, and a very good healthcare system as well. You know, I'd like the cost of healthcare in the Commonwealth is so high, that remains so high, that even people with very good insurance policies can still and do become bankrupted if they have a serious illness, oftentimes. You know, climate change is probably the biggest threat that we face, and I support legislation. I support this session. Support legislation to create a climate bank in Massachusetts, and also to put a deadline on electrifying our commuter rail system. Also, we need to reform the energy facility siting process, so that any community that's that is being looked to have a new facility should have a stronger voice in that siting. And we need to incorporate environmental justice principles in stakeholder engagement. You know, the right to vote is a sacred right, and we, with the Voter Act that we passed last session, we really moved things forward in Massachusetts. But one thing we didn't do was establish same-day voter registration. I'm working to get that done, and I filed legislation this session to do that. Well, listen, I will I'll end it right there so that we can do questions and answers. And thank you very much again for having us all today.
Super. Thank you very much, Representative. And that's actually a perfect segue. I have a number of climate related questions already that have come in the chat box. So unless it's directed at one of you, please feel free to step up and answer it or not pass it on. But the first question is a climate action question. How to put pressure on the administration to speed approvals of community choice aggregation programs?
Yeah, I've heard about that a lot, and from a number of communities, obviously including Wayland. And I do think this is, where I'm feeling very encouraged by the Healy-Driscoll administration is that I do think it's about, replacing the leadership from the Baker-Polito administration in DPU and DOER to make sure that there's someone truly focused on helping communities that are trying to do the right thing and move away from fossil fuels and benefit from moving to an electrification of the grid and the bargaining power through community aggregation. So I think we're all waiting for some of these positions to be replaced, and I think clearly Governor Healy has made this one of her top issues. Is climate, and I'm excited already by some of her appointments for EEA and the climate chief, and looking forward to those next agencies having appointments that are much more focused on combating climate change than the Baker-Polito administration was.
Any other thoughts or comments?
I just add that we also, unfortunately, are being held back by some of the decisions that ISO New England has made and continues to make. And last week I was speaking with a staffer with Congresswoman Clark's office, had a meeting with him and went over this. So it's a state and federal, issues to overcome. And thank you.
I'm going to continue on the climate theme here. What are your top priorities to get us to the state goal of 50% GHG reduction by 2030?
And I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your top priorities to get us to the state goal of 50% GHG reduction by 2030?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it clearly requires a multi-pronged approach. I mentioned earlier that the three of us were proud to vote for the next generation 2050 roadmap and then enact driving offshore wind and clean energy forward just this past year. So I think we've set a very clear path, and I think if anything, the challenge is implementation. I think a big part of that is the staffing, is increasing the staffing for each of the environmental agencies or climate agencies. I mentioned from, the Green Communities Act to Mass DOER, to DPU, to EEA. And again, this is where we've got some great news with the Healy-Driscoll administration is, she's proposing to significantly boost, a lot of those agencies in terms of staff. One of the things I've heard a lot about, and I mentioned her earlier, in Wayland, Ellen Tone with Energized Mass, is that a real sense of frustration that under the Baker-Polito administration, there wasn't clear direction to communities about what steps they needed to take to meet those 2030 climate emission reduction goals. So I'm hoping with sort of a more beefed up environmental and climate agencies, more staff, they'll be able to better, provide that information as well as, hopefully more funding. So I think that's critical. And in terms of what might be possible for this session on legislation, because again, I think it's really important to emphasize the two major bills that became law during the past session is I have heard a lot about strengthening the green building code to make sure that our especially new homes or rehabbed homes or buildings are energy efficient, that we're moving to 100% clean energy. I have a bill that would require that all new homes and buildings or rehabbed homes or buildings be solar roof ready, so that solar panels can automatically be put on these buildings, and therefore less on, trees that are cut down in other parts of the state. So I think we will. I'm hopeful we will take additional climate legislation action, but I do think a big part of it is the staffing and the enforcement of the very strong laws that we passed over the past 2 years.
If I could jump in for a minute here. As Representative Gentile and Senator Eldridge have mentioned, we have voted in each of the last 2 sessions for very good climate bills. And I expect we're going to continue to pass another bill on climate in this session as well. But at this point, we really need the administration to kind of step up and do the implementation that's necessary for what the legislature has already passed. And we weren't getting it, quite frankly, out of the Baker administration. We weren't. But we have an opportunity now. On a local level, I've been very happy to have gotten funding both for Natick and Sherborne in the past few years for sustainability coordinators. And it would be helpful. I know that the question was originally about local energy aggregation, I guess. So that has done very effectively in Natick through the sustainability office here in Natick. And people need help in trying to figure this stuff out, quite frankly, to figure out what makes most sense for them and their families. And it's very helpful if there is someone designated in each town to assist in that process, whereby we can move towards more sustainable energy supplies, but also save some families some money at the same time.
Excellent. I'm going to change topics here a little bit, and these are some lead questions that I had submitted before the recording. The League advocates for same-day voter registration. We thank Representative Gentile for being the lead sponsor of the bill to recognize that Senator Eldridge is on the Joint Committee on Election Law. How do you think same-day voter registration will fare this session? How do you think? How do you hope? How will it?
Oh, well,
I'm going to let Carmine answer that one.
well,
I'm happy to chip in.
I hope for the best. I hope for the best. However, I know that the headwinds are very strong, and so it will be we'll make a strong effort. However, there are people who are really probably will be standing in the way. So we have to. I don't know that we'll be success. If we can be successful this session, that's tremendous. Otherwise, we'll continue on until we get it done. We had a supplemental budget that we passed last week, and in that budget was a bill that I had filed 4 years ago. I filed it again 2 years ago. Finally, I filed it in January, and it was placed into the supplemental budget bill. So that has to do with notarization, and during the pandemic, we were able to do remote notarization, and now we'll be able to do remote notarization, permanently. And there are other notary reforms. It's something that I've been working on for years. Things take a lot of time, and we have this effort for same-day voter registration. We have a lot of other projects that we're trying to get through, and whether we never know whether we're going to get it through this session or a later session. But sometimes we don't know that we have opposition, but it's there, it's invisible. We have opposition on same-day voter registration, and we'll do the best we can, and we'll fight for it.
Excellent. And this is to all of you, or whoever wants to answer it. What's the outlook for Common Start bill that will increase funding for children in early education?
I think it's excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to do something there, whether or not it's that specific piece of it of legislation. But I think you can pretty much count on that early childhood education and trying to increase access and make it affordable for everybody is probably one or two biggest priorities of the legislature over the next 2 years.
We have the highest childcare costs in the nation in Massachusetts, and Middlesex County has the highest in the state. So that I think we will step up and provide financial assistance and lower those costs this session. I think a lot of us really prioritizing that, and hopefully that will happen.
Yeah, and I would share that with my colleagues, and I think Justin Replinsky made a bit of a reference to it, is just making sure it's comprehensive. We don't want to leave anyone out. Middle class families are squeezed just as much as those who are less well off, and we want to make sure it's truly comprehensive. So I'm hoping it's similar to the Student Opportunity Act in terms of a very comprehensive, sort of once in a generation law. So I'm feeling optimistic about this session.
Although this question, sorry, Carmen.
No, I just wanted to point out that in the governor's bill, Wayland has fully a 19% increase in Chapter 78 to education this year.
Wow.
19%.
Although this question is for Senator Eldridge, each one of you are welcome to answer it. Senator Eldridge, how likely is the bill to lift the cap on housing development incentive program to pass so that it achieves its purpose of creating more affordable housing?
Which program is this?
That's fine.
It is referred to Housing Development Incentive Program.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is what I've already gotten pretty engaged with, as someone that is very focused on affordable housing and not this argument that if you just build more market rate housing that some of it will be affordable. I just think it's not realistic. And the HDIP tax credit, this is a tax credit for developers. And one of the strange realities of it is that it's a tax credit for developers to build just more market rate housing in gateway cities. And I recognize that there certainly needs to be more housing in every community, including gateway cities. But the real head scratcher for me is that if we're serious about building affordable housing, recognizing that in communities like Lowell and Leominster and Worcester, there are serious homelessness issues. You have a lot of low income and working families that are really facing eviction and real challenges. Why would we just do a tax credit that builds more market rate housing? So I have a bill that would require that the HDIP program, if it does get expanded, which is probably likely, that at least 20% of that housing should be affordable. And there's a Commonwealth Magazine op-ed in today online. Really don't understand why we would do a housing tax credit that doesn't build any more affordable housing. So eager to have that debate and discussion in the Senate.
I'd just like to say that we have reason to be optimistic about affordable housing being built in the Commonwealth in the next year, in the next 2 years. It was a little less than a month ago, we had a meeting of human service providers in Framingham, and the Senate President Karen Spilka reminded us that the legislature last year appropriated fully $1 billion for housing, which Governor Healy has inherited. $1 billion that can be directed for housing construction. And at the beginning of her term, the governor said that she was directing staff to identify each and every parcel of vacant state property and assess each parcel for its suitability for housing. So with $1 billion already appropriated and not allocated, and I think that I'm confident. Knock on wood, confident that we will see a lot of housing built, affordable housing, low-income housing, market rate housing. We'll see a lot of housing built in the Commonwealth. I work at the local level. I'm chair of the Sudbury Housing Trust, and I think a lot of us are active at the local level. When we see things at the local level, it informs our actions at the state level. And thank you.
This next one is, I think, more of a plea than it is a question, but I think I'm going to get it on the record for all of you to understand the gravity of it. And it is, Wayland is hoping to build a senior center this year, but we are concerned about the impact of inflation on the appropriation. Any help you can provide will be greatly appreciated. So that is a comment from the community, I think, and a fair one. So it's been a long time coming for Wayland. Transportation is a huge issue for older residents in Wayland. Mass transit problems are in the news on a daily basis. Traffic congestion creates longer and longer commutes. Are there any solutions on the horizon? That's a big question.
Well, tomorrow we have a meeting of all of the regional transit authorities in Boston, and I'm thinking that will be a subject that will be brought up. I think it's important for communities at every level, town level, state level, to focus on transportation. For example, in Sudbury, we have a transportation committee which has been very active for several years now. We've appropriated money at the local level to be able to get people Uber rides or taxi rides to medical appointments, for groceries, or people that are shut in to get them to the senior center if the van is inadequate, what have you. And I'm interested in empowering the 14 regional transit authorities, give them more ability, because it's essential for people to live a full life. They need that transportation, and oftentimes it's that last mile that needs to be managed, and there's a lot of effort being put into all of it.
As someone who currently lives on Route 27 and has lived his entire life along the Route 27 corridor, one way or another, let me say I am quite familiar with traffic in Metro West. So I've dealt with a whole lot of road projects in my time in the legislature. And of course, people complain all the time about the conditions of the roads. And then when the construction starts, they complain about the fact that there's construction going on those roads. You can't win, but I get it. Anybody who lives in Metro West knows that we lose a lot of time every single day sitting in traffic, sitting in our cars. And it's tough. But there's some things that we can do as residents of the area. We can be smarter about how we use our cars. We don't have to, quite frankly. This is one of my pet peeves. And maybe I shouldn't even say this, but whatever. If you want to see a wasteful use of cars, go to any elementary school or middle school at drop-off or pickup time. I have to say that, where you will literally have hundreds and hundreds of parents with one kid in each car getting dropped off and picked up, rather than A, walking or riding a bike to school, or B, carpooling, or C, taking the bus. Somehow this has evolved into common practice. And I'll tell you, all of us who commute in Metro West know what the school hours are and what areas we should avoid because of that phenomenon. Maybe this isn't politically correct what I'm talking about, but there are some things that we can do to help the situation, I'll say. I'm glad that Carmine brought up the regional RTA. Obviously, I've been a big supporter of that since its inception about a decade or so ago. And I'm supporting everything that they can do to make that more useful. For those people who want to use the commuter rail in Wayland, you know, at least the southern half that I represent, some of them are coming to the Natick Center station. That's undergoing a beautiful reconstruction at this moment, going to make it fully accessible. So I encourage people to use that as well. Let's get out of our cars as much as we can.
Agreed. And I would just add to what Carmine and David said is that, you know, it's a mix of things, right? And I think, you know, my emphasis in going to a lot of the community events that we all go to is, you know, getting input from residents about making sure that Metro West gets its fair share. You know, the broadly Metro West is served by, you know, a number of different RTAs. I think the district I represent is served by 4 RTAs. You know, we've got a really exciting rail trail network that is developing in, you know, each of our districts, making sure that, you know, that's strengthened, as David said, getting, you know, people don't have to use their cars to get to certain places. I will say in the commuter rail front, and a district I represent has both the Fitchburg line and the Worcester line, is that, you know, you're not having as many people use the commuter rail to get to work in Boston or Cambridge. You know, part of that is the cost. On the other hand, of course, more people are working remotely. So certainly there's going to be some investments in the MBTA. However, my concern is if all of this millionaire's tax money goes to the MBTA, whether commuter rail or subway, you know, there's not going to be as much money for the RTAs, for shuttle systems within, you know, communities, and just a real committed focus to addressing the traffic issues in Metro West, which are among the worst traffic nightmares in the entire state. So we really need to hear from more people about their ideas to address transportation gridlock in Metro West.
Thank you. From transportation to guns. There is talk of an omnibus gun control bill to deal with ghost guns, 3D printed guns, data on guns used in crimes, other issues we still haven't covered in Massachusetts. What should be in the bill, and what are the constraints given the Supreme Court ruling?
All right, I'll take this one because obviously this has been my issue for many years. It should all be in the bill as far as I'm concerned. That's number one. As Carmine mentioned, I filed with the assistance of both Senator Eldridge and Representative Gentile, and then many other members of the House and Senate, 13 separate gun-related bills this year. And I'm going to do everything in my power to get as much of those bills into the final bill that we'll put on the governor's desk and have Governor Healy sign it. Obviously, I'm very disappointed in what the Supreme Court has done in last summer in the Bruin decision, but there are ways around it, quite frankly. There are still a lot of measures that states, including Massachusetts, can take. The Bruin decision didn't say anything about regulating certain types of firearms that would include ghost guns. It gave us language that would allow us to restrict the possession or carrying of firearms in so-called sensitive places. So I have a bill on that. Although the Bruin decision effectively struck down what was our permitting system in Massachusetts at the time that the decision was issued, the House and Senate and Governor very quickly enacted another law with some language changes in it that in reality didn't change the people who would be restricted from owning firearms in Massachusetts. That we have not seen any real change in who gets approved for a gun permit and who gets denied for a gun permit in Massachusetts. We're learning how to work around the Supreme Court. Believe me, I'm not happy about the decisions, but there are a number of other things we can do. Let me just highlight one small thing I'll say that I think is important. Massachusetts requires that a person applying for a gun license in Massachusetts take a safety course. Very important thing. However, in the curriculum for that required safety course, there is no requirement that you demonstrate that you actually know how to load a gun and fire a gun safely. There are people who will give you your certificate for taking that course with a short class conducted at your kitchen table with a plastic gun. That's foolish as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to own a gun, you should learn how to fire it safely, how to load it safely, how to handle it safely. So I have a bill, and I believe that both of my colleagues here are co-sponsors of it, that requires that as part of the curriculum of the gun safety course, you actually demonstrate knowledge of how to safely load and fire a gun. I analogize this to the driver safety course, quite frankly. We've all taken driver training and had kids who've taken driver training. In driver training, there is a classroom element and then a practical element where you learn how to drive a car. The current safety course in Massachusetts only takes the classroom part. So this is to avoid a real tragedy happening sometime because it has happened. When the first time that somebody attempts to fire a gun, they really don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to load it. They don't know which end is which, quite frankly. And that's a horrible situation. So that is a simple, common sense approach that most other states actually require, including states like Texas. They require this, but for some reason we haven't done it in Massachusetts. So to answer the original question, there's a lot we can do. I'm very hopeful that we're going to do a great bill in Massachusetts with the assistance of my good colleagues here, Senator Eldridge and Representative Gentile. And we will continue to make Massachusetts one of the safest states in the country.
Excellent, thank you. We have a little less than 10 minutes and I see 2 questions on the chat screen, so I'll have to get to them and then we'll close it out. So this one is back to the environment. What are your thoughts on an act to expand the bottle bill? In the last session, it was referred to the Ways and Means, but didn't move. Redemption rate in Massachusetts is 56%. Michigan has a 10-cent deposit. Redemption rate is 89%. Waste stream has been reduced by 6 to 8% each year. Thoughts?
Yeah, I fully support the bill, and I'm pretty sure I've co-sponsored. If I haven't, I will be very shortly. And just been a longtime supporter of the bottle bill. We know that this financial incentive works, but of course, when the bottle bill was last updated, I think it was the 1980s, and it doesn't apply now to a lot of fruit juices and seltzer and other things. So expanding that, increasing it to keep up with the cost of things and make sure that it's a solid financial incentive to return those cans to a store. So fully support it. And I think there was tremendous progress on the bill last session, because remember, it did go to the ballot a few years ago and it was defeated. And unfortunately, I think that's hurt the bill. So I'm hoping we can pass that this session and fully support it.
I've always supported that bill as well, and we know it works because, as we all know, there was a very famous Seinfeld episode where Newman and Kramer collected the cans and brought them out to Michigan in Newman's postal truck. So we know it works because Larry David wrote that it works, and I trust everything that Larry David does.
So I'm also supporting it, and I will tell you that I think I'm sure that everyone in the Zero Waste Caucus, of which I'm a member, supports that as well.
Thank you. And there's one last question. It's from Barbara, and she says, I didn't know that Sudbury had a housing trust. Why doesn't Wayland belong to it? The Regional Housing Service Office provides the member community of Acton, Bedford, Burlington, Concord, Lexington, Sudbury, and Weston with affordable housing support and information. Carmine, I think that's probably to you. I don't know.
Absolutely. So every municipality in the Commonwealth is able to establish a housing trust for itself. The housing trusts are 9 members. You have to have 5 in order to function. That's why I joined the trust a couple of years ago. They only had 4 members. They didn't have the number they needed. So I joined and became the 5th member. We now have 8 members. And I chair the meeting, the trust. So Wayland is able to also act in a similar manner. Concord has a housing trust, and they've also Concord's a new community that I'm representing. I'm representing 2 of the 5 precincts because of redistricting, and their housing trust has been very active, and they've put together a program to create an income stream, so that they're able to build affordable housing units there in Concord. So I'm happy to work with people in Wayland to develop that in Wayland.
Although I've just gotten a text from our president of our Wayland League that Wayland does in fact have a housing trust.
There you are. I was just about to say.
We're ahead of the ball there.
Right. That's
So
right.
I think with that, we have less than 3 minutes to go. I would like to thank you all very much for joining the league discussion here, for showing us your faces, your personalities, our new representatives. And I hope we can have the opportunity to do this again. If there's an issue that you need our input in, we'd be happy to be the vehicle to bring people together for this. I'm going to remind people that this forum is available on Waycam, on the Wayland League of Women Voters website, as well as Energize Wayland's website. So if someone wants to watch it again or pass it on, it's available. I want to thank Pat Vandersteiner from the Energize Wayland for being our tech person behind the scenes, and also to remind you of 2 dates, that on April 13th, also at a Zoom format, we will have the candidates night, and all questions have to be submitted in advance in writing to the league. Info at lwvwayland.org, as well as on Thursday, April 20th, also on Zoom, the town meeting issues forum that the league regularly hosts will be held. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
Good to see
much.
everyone.